Hi, my name is Gregg. I'm director of the McConnell Center here at the University of Louisville. And this year we've embarked upon a project we're calling Why You Should Read. And the object is to help create a more vibrant reading culture in the United States. We're under a lot of headwinds, a lot of pressure on our times, a lot of competition for our time that books used to be able to fare a little bit better in and than they are maybe right now. So that's our project, is to try to encourage you to pick up a new book or two or three in this coming year that you haven't read before, or maybe it's a book that you've read, but maybe in high school, and it's worth a reread. Well, today I've got one of those books that I think you may have read in the past. My guess is you did, but it's worth a read in 2024, and that is Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451. Fahrenheit 451. I just spent a weekend with some alumni and some students having a conversation about Fahrenheit 451, and it led us into so many other important topics that I think it will for you as well. It's worth picking up again in 2024. So I just have 5 reasons why I think you should read Fahrenheit 451, or you should reread it. You should reread it now. You know, C.S. Lewis once said he never wanted to hear someone say they'd read whatever book, because he said if you've only read it once, there's no hope for you. If you think that's enough, there's no hope for you. The wisdom from a book comes on the second readings, the third readings, and the fourth readings. And I've read Fahrenheit 451, and I've had conversations with people about it and run seminars on it for over the years. I haven't done it in many years, so it's refreshing to read it in 2024. I'm going to have 5 reasons why I think you should pick up Fahrenheit 451 and read it in 2024, 2025, 2026, whenever you are watching this. First reason is, you know, the caricature of this book, which was written in 1951 by Ray Bradbury. The caricature of this book is a book about censorship. And that's true. There are firemen, obviously, that burn books. I'm going to try not to give too many spoiler alerts here, but there are firemen in this book that burn books, they burn libraries, and that's their job. In fact, the very first line of the book is, "It was a pleasure to burn." It was a special pleasure, is the second line, to see things eaten, to see them blackened and changed. So yes, it is about censorship. It's about book burning. It is about Bradbury's concern that there is a particular alliance that sort of happens between agitated minorities and a complacent majority. I think that's how I understand his concerns. And you can see this in other places in Bradbury's work, including in the Martian Chronicles, in the short story Usher 2, which I urge. It's his homage. I urge you to read that too. It's his homage to Edgar Allan Poe. But in that, it is really about people particularly about censoring Poe, but it's also of censoring fairy tales and removing fairy tales and the fantasy and science fiction from our reading, from our libraries and stores, so that we can't get them and read them anymore. So Fahrenheit 4, that's a concern of Bradbury's. There's no doubt about it. But I think the way it's usually pitched is there are some bad guys out there, these firemen, there's bad guys out there that are intent on censoring the rest of us from reading, from getting dangerous ideas and information. And yeah, that's a subtext, but it's only a subtext to this text, I think, really, because the real censorship in the book, the real censorship goes on by people not reading, people not wanting to read. Why don't you want to read? Why don't you want to read? Well, because reading makes life difficult. Reading challenges you by looking at other people's lives, by living other lives. It challenges you to look at your own life. At one point in the book, one of the firemen says, "We are the happiness boys. We're the happiness boys." So what Bradbury is saying here is, yes, you might get to a culture where there's going to be actual physical burning of books, but what's going to happen is, to get to that culture, it's going to be people choosing not to read, choosing not to want to read, because reading makes life hard. Reading makes us question ourselves. Reading might make us depressed sometimes, sad sometimes, unhappy sometimes. And so we will develop an ethic against reading, is his concern. So I think it's a more nuanced, it's a more complicated book than it is stereotypically considered in high school, and why, frankly, some people want to read it. In 2024, we better be thinking about that. We do have censorship going on. We have canceling of authors and canceling of ideas, and we have, of course, a robust. I'll say it's not robust, but we have pockets of fights about the curriculum and about what is available to children in public schools, etc. I think reading Fahrenheit 451 in 2024 might give us, provide us some places to converse about those topics, and some ideas that we might want to wrestle with. So, number two, the second reason I think you should read Fahrenheit 451 is because, even though it was written in 1951, so 70 odd years ago, even though it was written in 1951, it feels so contemporary. It feels so much like our culture, I think, in so many ways. We walk around and look around. I don't have earbuds with me, but I walk around on this campus here, and we see people all over with either the big headphones around their necks, that they hang around their necks when they're talking to somebody, but over their ears when they're walking around. We see them with earbuds in. Ray Bradbury predicted that in 1951, that culture, he calls them seashells, I believe, in the book, that they have little shells that will stick in our ears, that will play music, that will keep us occupied, it'll keep us from engaging with one another, it'll keep us from having to think about ourselves, about our problems, about our issues, and fix them potentially. They're a distraction, right? He predicts a culture of distraction. Wow, are we in that culture of distraction now, right? It is the little ubiquitous things in our ears. It is the sounds going around everywhere we go, from coffee shops to the gym, to walking around, fraternity music blaring here across the street. We're in a noisy place, and Bradbury predicts that, and he sort of gives us an indication that kind of distraction is going to be voluntary. We're going to choose to put those in our ears because we don't want to engage. Put those in our ears because we don't want to think. Screens. I now have a screen in my house, and I bet you do too, which is, it's 4 times the size of my TV I grew up with, in maybe 5 times, and when I was in high school. We live in a culture of screens. Screens are ubiquitous as well, everywhere, right? So I can look in my office right now, and there's at least 2 screens. One I'm speaking to right now on the phone, and one on my computer. But in our homes, we have TVs, we have computers, we have iPads, we have Kindles, we have and Kindles can be used to read, but Kindles can also be used to play games. They can also be used to watch videos. They can also be used to do email and work kind of things as well. And we have our giant TVs. So in Fahrenheit 451, you see a world where these massive screens in our homes are taking our time, taking our attention, becoming a distraction. And so I think it's worth looking at for that reason as well. And on that point, it's worth looking at what the culture that brings about this culture of distraction and alienation, let me call it, a culture of distraction and alienation that you see in Fahrenheit 451. This is a culture that has no front porches anymore. Strangers don't talk to one another. It's frowned upon to walk, particularly at night, out on the streets. It is we're alienated with our screens and with our earbuds, etc. So he gives us, Bradbury does, a kind of a picture of how this society developed. And so I think I'm going to run through a couple of these things. I think they're a real challenge, and you should think about them. We should think about them. So we should read the book in order to think about them. He talks about films and magazines in this speech. Films and magazines and radios all leveled down, he says, leveled down to some sort of paste-pudding norm. Paste-pudding norm. He says in the 20th century, everything became fast, became dominated by the camera. Books were cut shorter. Condensations, digests, tabloids, everything boils down to the gag and the snap ending. Boy, if that doesn't summarize our world of TikTok and reels and these short little snaps, the short little gags. How much time did you spend today? How much time did you spend today laughing, being entertained by somebody falling down or some quick little shot of a little piece of video of maybe somebody falling down, maybe somebody attractive, it may be somebody, maybe a clip of a football game yesterday, which is what I spent some of my time with. But it's the snap little gag, it's the snap little laugh. Out of our nursery into the colleges and back to the nursery. There's your intellectual pattern for the first 5 centuries or more. I'll leave that right there. Everything is speed. Click, pick, look, eye, now, flick, here, there, swift, pace, up, down, in, out, blah, blah, blah. Our school is shortened. Disciplines relaxed. Philosophies, histories, languages dropped. That's all happening, right? It's all happening in America today. English and spelling gradually neglected. How many kids, we don't even teach cursive anymore. I mean, Bradbury wouldn't even have seen that, I guess. We don't teach cursive, we don't teach spelling, at least so many of our schools. I remember when my son came home many years ago now, and I asked him, where are you, why haven't I seen you studying for spelling tests? And he said, well, we don't have spelling tests anymore. I'm like, you what? You don't have spelling tests? But no, it's all sort of, put my cards on the table nonsense, and the philosophy, nonsensical philosophy. So the new approach was that if a kid didn't know how to spell a word on a paper that they turned in, then the teacher would circle it and say, go to a dictionary and learn how to spell it. Well, let me tell you, I was a boy, and I was a terrible student as a boy. Exactly what I would do is exactly what my kids did, is exactly what most kids do. They won't push themselves in that situation. They don't want to have to go to the dictionary. They don't want to have to learn, how to spell a new word. And so they will dumb down their vocabulary, not pushing themselves. At least that's how I see it. How about sports? Are we going to encourage sports? Oh my gosh, yes. Bowling, basketball, billiards, football, more sports for everyone, group spirit, fun. And you don't have to think, right? More cartoons, more pictures. He says, it didn't come from the government. Let's remember this. All this, he talks about 3-dimensional sex magazines and magazines that become a nice blend of vanilla tapioca and books that were mere dishwater. And he says, none of that stuff. It didn't come from the government. There was no dictum, no declaration, no censorship to start with. No. Technology Mass exploitation and minority pressure carried the trick, thank God. Today, thanks to them, you can stay happy all the time. Equality is going to be a big part of this culture. Everything is about happiness. Let's think about this. Pre-kindergarten, pre-K, school. The home environment can undo a lot you try to do at school, says this fireman giving this speech. That's why we've lowered the kindergarten age year after year until now we're almost snatching them from the cradle. Not good, bad, indifferent. I'm just saying Bradbury sort of predicted this future where our kids will be going, 6 weeks after being born or something, they will be in daycare and they will spend the next 18 years of their life outside the home being educated, schooled, etc. Again, good, bad, indifferent. And I could go on and on. There's numerous pages here. No front porches. What about schools? Well, he says you'll cram them full of facts. You'll cram them full of facts. They'll be all the schools will all be technical. They will be become focused on filling kids with information, not encourage them to think, not giving them literature to think about, but giving them facts to memorize. We live in a world of STEM and significant, I think that's aspect that's happened to American education. It reminds me of C.S. Lewis in his book, The Abolition of Man, where Lewis says that he's riffing off of Plato's three parts of the soul, the head, the chest, the trunk, or the reason, spirit, and appetite. And Lewis calls it head, chest, and trunk. And he says our modern schools, and he's writing this in the 1940s, our modern schools are doing great with the head part, doing math. They're doing math or memorizing facts and all that kind of stuff, doing great with that. Doing great actually on the appetite part. Our education system encouraging consumerism. Lewis might say we're doing pretty good about that, setting loose the appetites. And I won't make any further comment on that. But what we're doing very poorly. He said 1940s. He's saying this, and I think it's become ever more of a problem. Is we are removing the chest, our education. It's that literature component. It's the stories. It's the stories of heroes. It's the stories of people that are doing great things. It's the stories of people paying the consequences for doing very bad things. It's the stories of the human struggle that help us build that chest, build that heart that is so necessary if we're going to do good things in this world. So I think it's worthwhile then, my second point, it's worthwhile reading Fahrenheit 451 to revisit the culture that Bradbury lays out that is leading to a world where you've got firemen burning books as part of their as their main job. They're not putting out fires anymore. They're actually starting fires and burning them. So I think it's worth looking at that culture and interrogating our own culture. The third thing I'm going to say is that it's also worth reading Fahrenheit 451 to help you interrogate yourself. How much time are you spending with earbuds? How much time are you spending distracted? How much time are you spending on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, which you're watching this right now? So hopefully this doesn't count as a total distraction. I think reading Fahrenheit 451 should help you interrogate yourself and ask yourself, how much time am I spending on those things? Instant gratification, easy gratification, compared to the harder work of picking up a book and reading a book and thinking about a book. So read it to interrogate yourself. The fourth reason, I think, is, and that's a huge undercurrent in this book, and it's something we talked a lot about at this retreat. As I said, one of the firemen at one point says, we're the happiness boys. And it's an undercurrent that people don't read in this culture of 451 because we don't read because we don't want to be unhappy. Reading makes us think. Reading slows us down. Reading, it depends on what book we're reading, but it might trouble us. It might force us to interrogate our own lives. It might force us to think about big questions of human nature and humanity's place in existence, and what it is to be a good human, and what it is to be a good citizen, and the like. Well, that all can make us unhappy, potentially. This book says, I think Fahrenheit 51 is going to tell us that the search for happiness, the way it's usually thought of, is not only not the proper use for your life, but it may be a very dangerous and almost subhuman, I think it may be a good way to put it, subhuman way of going about life to search for this happiness. Now, on the other hand, we're coming up on the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, which says that we all have a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So I think this book raises a question of what does happiness mean? Aristotle will tell us that the goal of life is happiness. It's eudaimonia. It's a fully flourishing. It's a thriving according to excellence and virtue. That may not be what you and I tend to think about as being what happiness is. And I don't think it's what Ray Bradbury thinks his culture thinks happiness is. I think reading Fahrenheit 451 opens up that really important human question is, what is happiness? What is happiness? And that might lead you to a variety of different authors, including Aristotle, as I just mentioned. Maybe the works of Arthur Brooks, who is really doing a lot of modern social science on what it is to be happy, how it is that we find happiness. Really worthwhile thinking about. And number 7, I think another reason to read Fahrenheit 451 is that embedded in this book is, I think, Ray Bradbury's throwing out of, the thing I do at the McConnell Center is I throw out keys, and we talk about, that's my approach to education is we find keys. And it's not about indoctrination. It's not about telling you what to think or telling you what you have to take away from a lesson, but it's throwing out keys and allowing people to pick them up, which may open doors for them down the road, or leave them behind and not worry about them ever again. Well, I think what Bradbury is doing in Fahrenheit 451 is tossing out keys. He's tossing out books, and they're embedded throughout the text, particularly toward the end. But throughout the text, you'll have references to books. I don't think they're random. I think he's giving us some great books that we should read. And so by reading Fahrenheit 451, it might be the beginning of you reading other books because Bradbury thought them important enough to have them saved in Fahrenheit 451. Again, I don't want to give you any spoiler alerts, but there is, in a world where no one is reading, in a world where reading is banned, in a world where the government has come in to try to help us be happy, has come in to eliminate books. While there are people that love books still, there's a remnant that loves books and is dedicated to keeping them alive. At one point, they're referred to as dust jackets. And so these people, this remnant, is forced to decide, not forced to decide, but this remnant decides, each person decides what book they're going to be. And they memorize that book. so that someday down the road, when the war's over that's going on, when maybe we've come to value reading again, we come to allow it again, they'll be able to record their books, put them back on paper, and we'll have those books saved. So my final question to you is, as you think about reading Fahrenheit 451, which I hope you do, I might ask you, what book would you be? What dust jacket would you put on? What dust jacket would you put on? What book would you save? If you were the last person that you had one book, you could save a book, and you could save it by memorizing it, what book would it be? Anyway, I hope you'll pick up Fahrenheit 451. You'll read it again. It's very worth it. Very worth it now in the 2020s, as it has been, frankly, since the 1950s. It's perennially in season. So go back and read Fahrenheit 451, and I hope it'll lead to a better reading culture for you, maybe the people around you, and then ask yourself that question. I'd be curious what you think. What book would you save? Thanks. Happy reading.